sad when our crystal friends sort of take a tumble. But there are two different viewpoints on this, okay? So some crystal healers think that once a crystal is broken, it shouldn't be used for healing anymore. It should be returned to the earth or buried, or that it can just be used to sort of send vibration out in general. Other crystal healers believe even if a stone is broken, it can still be used because the energy is still moving through that stone. Because in crystals, they have a regularly repeating atomic structure, or they have a crystalline blueprint. So all of the atoms and molecules are arranged in a very specific way. And so even if the crystal breaks or gets chipped or damaged, that the energy will still be moving through that crystal. So Naisha Asyan is someone who believes very strongly in this. So there's something in your crystal called a C-axis. And this is basically just the angle at which all of the molecules have stacked. And it's the central channel that goes along the crystal where the energy moves. So in a quartz crystal, the C-axis goes from the base toward the termination or the tip of the crystal, and it will always move in that direction. It has directionality to the energy. So Naisha feels that even if the crystal were to completely break in half, the energy is still moving in that direction. So now you just have two crystals that have energy moving in that direction instead of one. Now, like I said again, other crystal healers believe that once that crystal has been broken, it really shouldn't be used for healing anymore, and it should be like returned to the earth or something like that. I'm sort of somewhere in between. I feel like if it's a stone like this, and we're using it to direct energy out of that C-axis, out of the termination of the crystal. If we're using it, say, for a healing wand, where we need the focus to be really tight and intense, then I feel like if it's been broken or if the termination's been chipped, it's not going to do that as well. So at that point, I probably wouldn't use it for directing energy in a very specific way, but overall, it's still going to radiate energy. So I might use it, say, in a crystal grid, or I might use it in my environment in the corner of the room just to keep, you know, the energy moving and flowing properly in that room. So I think that, you know, it's really kind of a personal preference and your intuitive sense. How do you feel that the energy is moving in that crystal even though it's broken? I used to be really anti-gluing your crystals, and I still feel like if it's something like a big point like this and it breaks and you glue it back together, I feel like I'm not really quite sure how the energy is then moving through that stone at that point. Obviously, it's still moving along the C-axis, but our intention plays such a big role that if it bothers you that the crystal's broken and you feel like the energy is not moving well and that, you know, you're like subtly or subconsciously intending that it's not really moving well, then I think it's not going to work very well. But if gluing it back together helps you maintain that intention that it's moving in the direction that you want it to, then I guess that's okay. There's actually a great crystal healer friend of mine who brought up the point once to me that made really good sense, that quartz crystals, for instance, are primarily silicon. So if you were to get a silicon-based adhesive, it would be fairly uniform to the structure of the crystal, and it would be integrated a little bit easier into the energy of the stone. So, you know, like I said, it's sort of a personal preference. I probably wouldn't do it. I'd probably take those little pieces and put them in a house plant or out in my garden or something nice like that. But that's just what works for me. I don't really mind that my crystals are chipped up or damaged. I think they still work fine, but not for focusing and directing energy in a specific way. If I had a rough crystal, a rough chunk of something that got broken, I'd be fine with just having two rough chunks in. But for something like a resonator crystal, it's going to be a little bit different, but that's just my opinion. And it's really about the feel of the energy and how it's going to work for you at that point. You know, it could be that the crystal's trying to help you with a lesson in attachment. I've had that happen. I lost one of my most favorite crystals a few years ago, and I was so upset. And then I just finally got to the point where I was able to let it go because I thought, okay, this is a good lesson in attachment and not being attached to the physical object. You know, maybe the crystal worked with you and it's time to move on. You know, you didn't need that energy anymore maybe. You know, it's done its job. It's helped you work through a process and now it's time for a change or a shift. That's possible too. Sometimes the crystals in the universe know a lot more than we do. You know, we might have an idea of how we think things are supposed to be or how we want things to be, but the universe often has much bigger plans.